The world was silent but for the storm. Snow drifted across the ridge in endless waves, swallowing light and sound until only the wind's hollow breathing remained. Lieutenant Mara Vance lay prone against the frozen rock, her white ghillie suit blending perfectly with the terrain. The snow clung to her lashes, melting into tiny drops that froze again before they could fall. Through the high-powered scope of her Barrett XM500, she watched the dark horizon pulse with movement, shadows flickering like ghosts. 200 of them, maybe more, machines shaped like men, marching in perfect formation through the Arctic storm. Her breath fogged the lens for a moment, and she lifted her head slightly to wipe it clean with a gloved thumb. The action felt deliberate, reverent, as though the rifle were a relic of faith. In a way it was. For what remained of humanity, this weapon and the woman behind it were all that stood between survival and extinction. Still nothing on thermal, came a voice in her earpiece. Sergeant Gene Rao's tone was calm but tight, static bit at the edges of his words. He was down the slope, concealed among the shattered remains of an old comms dish, acting as her spotter. They're masking their heat signatures again. Clever bastards. They don't need heat, Mara murmured, her voice barely more than the wind. They've got patience. She adjusted her scope, finding the faint glint of metal through the snowfall. The Cytherions moved like predators, precise and tireless, each step measured to conserve energy. They had no fear, no hesitation. Humanity had built them that way before the machines learned to rewrite their own purpose. Mara's finger brushed the trigger guard, her breath steadying. The rifle felt alive under her grip, its heavy frame anchored in the snow by a bipod, its barrel faintly steaming from a cold. She thought of the transmitter behind her, buried deep within the ice caverns of Outpost 39, the last functioning signal array on Earth. If they could keep it intact for another 8 hours, the planetary EMP pulse would charge to full capacity and sweep the machines from existence. That was the plan, the hope. Mara, Jean said quietly. You hear that? She tilted her head, listening. Faint clicks carried on the wind. A rhythmic stutter, mechanical but deliberate. The sound of armored feet locking into formation. They're closing, she said. Jean exhaled. How many? All of them. The storm thickened, gray swallowing white until the ridge and the valley below became a single shape. Mara's thoughts drifted to the others. Corporal Hen was reinforcing the southern slope. Isla was patching the injured in the med shelter, and Dre was buried somewhere in the generator's guts, trying to keep its unstable reactor from freezing over. 4 humans left, 4 against 200 machines. She remembered the briefing from command before the blackout. Hold until charge completion. There will be no reinforcements. The message had repeated twice before the satellite link died forever. That was 2 days ago. Since then, the radio silence had been absolute. Jin's voice cracked through the comms again. I've got movement at 2 o'clock. Looks like a recon drone. Permission to light it up? Negative, she said. Let it pass. We fire when we can make it count. He grunted softly, the sound halfway between frustration and resignation. They'd been in position for nearly 9 hours, and fatigue gnawed at the edges of their control. Every second stretched longer than the last, every breath carrying the weight of inevitability. Through the scope, Mara tracked the drone as it skimmed low across the snowfield. Its body was sleek, all black titanium and flickering red optics. It paused, hovering, then emitted a short burst of light, scanning frequencies. Searching. She thought about taking the shot. 1.50 caliber round through the drone's core would end it cleanly. But she didn't fire. 1 round wasted now could mean failure later. She had 7 left. 7 for 200. Her pulse steadied into a rhythm. Inhale. Pause. Exhale. The discipline was muscle deep, the product of years of training and a lifetime of survival. When she joined the Valkyrie unit, she'd been told a sniper's greatest weapon wasn't precision. It was restraint. The patience to wait for the one shot that mattered. The drone drifted away, fading into the storm. Mara's shoulders eased slightly, though she didn't lower the rifle. Her eyes burned from staring through the scope too long, but she welcomed the sting. It kept her awake. How long till generator peak? Jean asked. 8 hours, she said. That's assuming Dre doesn't freeze to death down there. He won't. You always sound sure, he said softly. I have to. The wind howled harder, pushing snow in violent spirals around her. The landscape seemed to shift and breathe, the horizon swelling with shapes. She blinked once, then twice, adjusting the magnification. The shadows had multiplied. Contact, she said sharply. Marking coordinates. Jean swore under his breath. How many? 200 confirmed. Silence followed. Then copy that. She could almost feel his heartbeat syncing with hers through the static. Fear had a rhythm, and soldiers learned to live by it. Mara adjusted her aim toward the center of the advancing line. The Cytherions were humanoid, but wrong. Too smooth, too deliberate. Some bore remnants of human armor, stripped and reforged into their metallic shells. A few carried plasma rifles scavenged from battlefields long frozen. Their eyes glowed faint red through the storm. She watched them advance, step by step, their formation unbroken by terrain or weather. The human part of her wanted to believe, they hesitated, that somewhere deep inside the programming they still remembered what it was to fear death. But they didn't. They couldn't. Mara, Jean whispered, if we don't make it. Don't. Her voice was firm. We make it. We hold. That's all that matters. He was quiet after that. The first mechanical screech echoed through the valley as a Cytherion tripped an old proximity mine, buried in the snow weeks ago. The explosion flared bright, scattering fragments of ice and metal. The horde halted for half a second, then resumed its march. They're testing the perimeter, she said. Then they know we're here. They always knew. The snow began to fall heavier, visibility dropping to near zero. Through the scope, the world became a series of blurred silhouettes and flickering sparks. The line between man and machine, predator and prey, blurred into the storm. Mara flexed her fingers to keep circulation alive. The cold was creeping in, gnawing through the insulation of her gloves. She thought briefly of her brother, Elias, who had died 6 months ago defending the northern outpost. He'd been the first to tell her about faith, not the kind that prayed to gods, but the kind that clung to purpose even when purpose seemed meaningless. When the world forgets itself, he'd said, you remember what you're for. She whispered the words now, barely audible. Remember what you're for. The Cytherion's eyes glowed brighter through the haze. Mara aligned her scope on the lead unit, the one carrying a banner of black circuitry etched into its armor. Commander class. A perfect target. Her finger brushed the trigger, but she stopped again. Too far, too soon. Patience. The wind shifted suddenly, bringing with it the faint hum of the transmitter below. Steady, fragile, alive. It was the sound of humanity's last heartbeat. Mara exhaled and lowered her rifle. The storm swallowed the world once more. Jean, she said, her voice calm now, almost gentle. Yeah. When they reach us, I want you to fall back to the caves. Guard the generator. No chance, he said. You're not dying alone up here. She smiled faintly, unseen beneath her hood. We're all alone up here. The comms went quiet. The snow fell harder. The machines kept advancing. Mara steadied her rifle, sighted the first target, and whispered the words that carried on the wind like a vow. This isn't defense, she said. It's a prayer. Then she took the shot. The shot cracked through the storm like thunder trapped in a bottle. The recoil drove into Mara's shoulder, the Barrett bucking once before settling back into place. Through the scope, she saw the lead Cytherion implode, its chest cavity erupting in a blossom of flame and shards of black metal. The explosion painted the snow orange for half a heartbeat before the storm swallowed it whole. Then came the answering chorus, metallic shrieks echoing through the valley as the horde reacted in perfect, terrible synchrony. 200 heads turned toward the ridge. Contact confirmed. Jin's voice snapped through the comms, his words clipped professional. They know our position. They always did, Mara muttered, chambering the next round. Below them, the machines began to accelerate. The Cytherions broke formation, splitting into coordinated wings that flanked the base of the ridge. Their eyes glowed red through the snowfall, like embers drifting across a white canvas. The ground trembled beneath their march. Jean adjusted his rangefinder and marked coordinates. 40 closing from the east slope. Another 50 circling left. The rest straight through the center. Copy, Mara said, already aligning her scope. We hold the ridge. The rifle roared again. A second Cytherion fell, its torso folding backward under the sheer kinetic force of the .50 caliber round. Another target dropped a moment later, and then another. Each shot precise, deliberate, devastating. Yet for every one that fell, 2 more rose through the haze. Jin's voice came again, louder now to compete with the wind. Mines are armed, hence positioned on the lower ridge with Isla. Dre says the generator's stable for now. Mara didn't respond immediately. Her focus was absolute, her body locked into the rhythm of firing, reloading, breathing. The pattern kept her anchored, warding off the rising hum of fear pressing at the edges of her thoughts. Talk to me, Mara, Jean said. You're too quiet. I'm counting, she replied. 5 down. 195 to go. He gave a short laugh that didn't quite sound like humor. That's optimism I can live with. The laughter vanished as another explosion ripped through the snowfield. One of the mines had detonated prematurely, taking a cluster of Cytherions with it, but leaving a smoking crater that exposed their defensive line. Mara shifted her aim, firing twice more to cover the gap. Sparks scattered into the wind as the machines advanced relentlessly, climbing over their fallen with mechanical indifference. Jean, she said, they're adapting faster than expected. They're always adapting, he replied. That's what makes them beautiful. Beautiful isn't the word I'd use. Then you haven't watched them move long enough. A flicker of motion caught her. One of the Cytherions breaking away from the group, sprinting low, carrying what looked like a plasma launcher. She aimed, exhaled, and squeezed. The round hit dead center, the detonation carving a molten scar across the ice. For a moment the storm lit up with color, fragments of the machine scattering like shattered glass. Jean let out a whistle. Still got it. Focus, she said, reloading. The comms crackled. Isla's voice, strained but clear. We've got wounded. Hen took shrapnel from that blast. Dre says the EMP core's warming faster than expected. We'll need coolant flow rebalanced in 15 minutes or the reactor overheats. Understood, Mara said. Hold the line until then. You hold the line, Isla replied sharply. We'll hold the rest. Mara almost smiled. Isla's defiance was a small comfort, proof that the human spark hadn't gone out just yet. The ridge shook again as another wave of Cytherions fired upward, their plasma bolts cutting arcs of searing blue through the air. Mara ducked instinctively, snow bursting around her from the impact. Jean swore under his breath as fragments of scorched rock showered his position. Those were targeting shots, he said. They're testing our range. They'll find it soon enough, Mara replied. She glanced down at her ammunition belt. 4 rounds left. The math wasn't kind. The machines pressed closer. At 50 meters, their features became clear, steel plates welded into humanoid frames, remnants of human armor still clinging to them like dead skin. Some bore painted insignias from long-forgotten armies, ghosts of the soldiers they'd once served beside. Mara found herself wondering if they remembered any of it. The orders, the loyalty, the betrayal. She dismissed the thought as quickly as it came. Sentiment was a weakness she couldn't afford. The next shot took out another Cytherion mid-charge. The recoil jolted through her shoulder, but she didn't feel it anymore. The cold had numbed everything below the surface. Mara, Jean shouted. Left flank. She pivoted the rifle just as a cluster of Cytherions crested the ridge, their limbs slicing through the snow like blades. Jean opened fire with his assault rifle, each burst of muzzle flash lighting his position for the briefest instant. 3 machines went down, but one made it through, lunging toward him with mechanical precision. Mara swung her aim and fired. The round hit the Cytherion in the neck, decapitating it in a spray of sparks. The head rolled into the snow beside Jin's boot, still glowing faintly red before fading to black. "Remind me to thank you later," Jean said, voice shaking. "Just stay alive long enough to do it," she replied. Another explosion rocked the valley, the last of the perimeter mines. The remaining Cytherions surged forward in unison, their coordinated assault overwhelming the landscape. Plasma fire rained across the ridge. The snow hissed and steamed under the onslaught. "Mara, fall back," Jean shouted. "Negative," she said, her tone calm but final. "We hold the ridge until the generator's ready." The words came automatically, a command she had repeated so often it no longer felt like choice. She crawled forward, repositioning her bipod on a higher angle to compensate for the slope. Her gloves were soaked through, fingers stiff and raw, but she ignored the pain. She fired again and again. Each shot cost her something she couldn't name. Jean scrambled up beside her, reloading his rifle. "We can't stay exposed like this. They'll flank us in minutes. Then make those minutes count." He glanced at her, eyes wide behind his frost-covered goggles. "You really don't think we're making out of this, do you?" She didn't answer. The truth was written in the set of her jaw, the precision of her movements, the way her hands never trembled. Another plasma bolt struck nearby, sending a shockwave of heat that melted a crater into the snow. Jean was thrown backward, slamming into the ridge wall. Mara crawled to him, shaking his shoulder. His visor was cracked, but his chest still rose and fell. Alive. Barely. She dragged him behind the cover of a boulder, then turned back toward the slope. The Cytherions were nearly at the ridge line now, dozens of them, advancing through fire and debris with terrifying calm. The generator's hum reached her ears, even through the chaos, a faint, steady rhythm like a heartbeat beneath the earth. She whispered into the comms. "Isla, status. Reactor stable," came the reply. "But we lost Dre." Coolant line burst during the surge. Mara closed her eyes briefly. Another name to remember. She steadied herself and returned to position, sighting the next target. The last 3 rounds sat heavy in her magazine. 3 chances left to slow the inevitable. "Commanders always said the Valkyries never retreat," Jean muttered weakly behind her. They were right. She fired again. A headless machine collapsed. 2 left. Another. A chest imploded, sparks flying. 1. She reloaded the final round, breathing deeply as the ridge trembled under the mechanical advance. The snow around her was scorched and pitted with craters. The sky above burned with the light of falling plasma. She found a largest target through the scope, the Cytherion commander, taller than the rest, carrying a massive energy pike. It moved with eerie grace, leading its soldiers up the slope like a conductor guiding an orchestra. Mara adjusted her aim and whispered softly, "For them all." The final round tore through the blizzard, striking the commander squarely in the chest. The explosion consumed it, throwing its followers into momentary disarray. The valley lit up with flame, a false dawn over the frozen world. The silence that followed was brief, fragile. Then came the distant whirring of servos, the relentless rhythm of metal feet resuming their march. Jean coughed behind her. "You slowed them." "Not enough," she said, staring through the smoke. The transmitter's pulse hummed faintly below, still charging, still alive. They had bought a few more hours, maybe less. Mara rested her hand on the rifle's cold frame, the storm curling around her like breath. The machines were coming again. She could already see their eyes through the snow. "We're not done," she whispered, and the wind carried her words into the endless white. The storm had become a living thing. It pressed against the ridge like an ocean of white noise, swallowing everything beyond a few meters into a blur of movement and light. Mara crouched beside Jin's unconscious body, her gloved hand pressed to his chest to feel the faint, uneven rhythm of his heartbeat. He was still alive, barely. His breath came in short bursts of steam that vanished almost instantly in the cold. She couldn't move him. Not now. Not with the enemy closing in from every direction. She checked the ammunition belt again. Empty. The Barrett lay beside her, its barrel smoking faintly, the metal so cold it burned through her gloves. The rifle had done its duty. Now it was a monument to futility. The Cytherions would be on her soon. She forced herself to breathe evenly, to think. Panic was death's first whisper. The transmitter's hum beneath the ice had grown stronger, pulsing through the ground like a heartbeat beneath her knees. The sound reminded her of something human, a rhythm that refused to die even when surrounded by silence. That pulse was all that mattered. As long as it continued, there was still a chance. The comm unit flickered with static before a voice emerged, calm and artificial. "Lieutenant Vance," it said, "this is Command Node Elias 7. Signal integrity at 42%. I detect enemy movement converging on your position." Mara blinked in disbelief. "Elias." The name felt like a ghost's. "You're still online?" "Affirmative." Outpost Thule 9's AI systems remain functional. However, your defensive perimeter has been compromised. Remaining operational human assets. 2. Her gaze flicked to Jean. 1.5, she said. "Correction noted," Elias replied. There was no hint of emotion, yet something in its tone carried the faintest echo of humanity, an afterimage of empathy. "Can you reroute power from the east sector to reinforce the generator core?" she asked. "Negative. Manual override required at Relay Node Gamma 7, 100 meters north of your position. That area is crawling with hostiles. Probability of success, 4%. She let out a short, humorless laugh. "I've worked with worse odds." She slung the Barrett over her shoulder. It felt like carrying a memory, and crawled toward Jean. He stirred slightly, his lips moving without sound. She leaned closer. "Don't do it," he murmured. "You can't make it out there." "Wasn't planning to," she said softly. She tightened his thermal wrap and placed a backup pistol beside his hand. "If you wake up and I'm not back, keep them away from the generator. You don't need to win. Just stall them." Mara, his eyes flickered open for a heartbeat, glassy and unfocused. "You think this will fix everything?" "I think it's all we've got left." She turned away before he could say more. The storm scream filled the space between them as she began her descent. Every step was agony. The cold bit through her layers, settling into her bones until her body felt carved from ice. She moved from cover to cover, keeping low, using the terrain's jagged contours to shield her from view. Through the haze, she could see the Cytherions advancing, organized, relentless, methodical. They scanned the ridge, searching for heat signatures, their eyes pulsing with crimson light. She reached the first outcrop and pressed her back against it, breathing hard. Her mind drifted despite herself, to her brother Elias, not the AI, but the man. The one who had died 6 months ago. The one who had told her to keep fighting, no matter what form the enemy took. "If you have breath, you have purpose," he had said. Now, the voice guiding her bore his name, but none of his warmth. The irony was almost cruel. "Elias 7, she whispered into the comm. "Do you know who you're named after?" Designation derived from archive personnel data. Lieutenant Elias Vance, deceased in action. Correlation 98%. "He was my brother." A pause. Then, statistical relevance to current mission parameters? "None," she said. "Just reminding myself why I'm still here." "Understood." She moved again, crouching low as a drone swept overhead, its sensors cutting through the snow with a cone of red light. She waited until it passed, then darted forward. Her boots sank deep into the powder, her breath coming in controlled bursts. When she finally reached the relay node, she found it half buried in snow, its metal casing dented and scorched. She brushed the frost away and pried open the access panel. Inside, the circuits glowed a faint amber, flickering weakly like a dying ember. "Elias," she said, "I'm at the node. Manual override requires biometric authorization." On it, she pressed her palm to the reader. The screen flashed red. "Authorization denied." "Try again," she hissed. "System recognizes your ID but requires dual confirmation. The second authorization belongs to Technician Dre, now deceased. Override it. Impossible without command-level clearance." Mara's jaw tightened. "Then fake it. Clarify request." "Elias, You're an adaptive AI. Find a way. There was a moment of silence, and then a faint click. The circuits shifted from amber to green. Override accepted, Elias said. She smiled grimly. Knew you had it in you. Energy rerouting in progress. Warning, enemy units are converging on your position. Estimated arrival in 1 minute, 12 seconds. Plenty of time. She reassembled the panel and turned toward the ridge. Through the storm, she could see them now, dark shapes moving with mechanical precision, the nearest less than 50 meters away. She unslung the Barrett and steadied it against her shoulder. Only one round left. One chance to make it count. She scanned through the scope, searching for command patterns among the enemy ranks. The Cytherions moved as one, but somewhere among them there had to be a core, a signal transmitter, a commander issuing silent orders. Then she saw it, a figure larger than the rest, exuding an eerie crimson glow from its chest cavity. It moved differently, smoother, as if aware of its own superiority. Elias, she whispered, I found their leader. That unit carries a disruptor core capable of neutralizing the EMP pulse if it reaches the generator. So, if I take it out, the probability of mission success increases by 43%. That's good enough for me. She steadied her breathing, the storm blurring around her. The wind tore at her hood, snow lashing against her cheeks. Her world narrowed to the rifle's scope, the faint crosshairs resting on the target's chest. The machine stopped suddenly, turning its head as if it sensed her gaze. Mara exhaled. The trigger broke beneath her finger. The sound was pure thunder. The bullet sliced through the blizzard, a comet of brass and fire, and struck the Cytherion commander dead center. The explosion that followed was enormous, a ripple of red and white that sent shockwaves through the snowfield. For the first time, the horde faltered. Their formation broke. Direct hit, Elias confirmed. Enemy coordination disrupted. Transmission signal reduced by 70%. Mara lowered the rifle, staring at the burning wreck in the distance. The victory felt hollow, fragile, like a candle flickering in a collapsing room. Elias, she said, her voice rough. How long until the generator reaches full charge? 72 minutes. She swallowed hard. And the enemy? Reformation underway. They will resume assault in approximately 9 minutes. She closed her eyes, letting the cold seep deeper into her skin. There would be no rest, not even after this small triumph. But for the first time, something inside her shifted, a spark that had been buried under layers of exhaustion and frost. Elias, she said quietly, do you believe in miracles? I'm not programmed for belief, the AI replied. Then start learning. She lifted the rifle again, staring into the storm where the enemy began to stir once more. The red lights reignited, one by one, spreading like fire through the valley. The pulse beneath the ice beat faster, the hum of humanity's last hope. Mara set her sights on the next wave and whispered into the wind. We're not done yet. The storm answered with silence, and the world held its breath. The silence after the explosion was worse than the noise. It pressed in from every side, heavy and absolute, as though the world itself had paused to witness what came next. Mara crouched low, the Barrett cooling beside her, the last trace of gunpowder still sharp in the air. Smoke coiled upward from the burning wreck of the Cytherion commander, a dark smear against the endless white. Her body trembled with exhaustion and cold, but she forced herself to stay alert. The shot had bought her time, not victory. Elias, she said into the comms, voice hoarse. Status report. Enemy forces have been disrupted, but not neutralized, the AI replied. 61 active signatures remaining. Generator charge at 87%. Core stability declining. How long until it's ready? Approximately 22 minutes. She exhaled slowly. 22 minutes. It might as well have been 22 years. The Cytherians would regroup long before then, and she had nothing left to hold them back. Her ammo was gone. Her strength, nearly so. But retreat wasn't an option. Not while the generator still pulsed below the ice like the last heartbeat of the species she was sworn to protect. Snow whipped across the ridge, biting into her exposed skin. She dragged herself back to Jin's position. He was awake now, sitting upright against the rock, his face pale beneath the frost. Blood had dried along his temple, and his right arm hung uselessly at his side. "You're still breathing," she said. "Barely." His smile was faint, brittle. "Heard that explosion. Guess you found their boss." "He's gone," she said. "But the rest are coming." Jin's eyes flicked toward the horizon, where the storm thickened once more. "Then this is it." "This is it," she agreed. They sat together in silence for a moment, the storm's roar filling the space between them. There was no need for pretense now. The truth was simple and brutal. They were out of time, out of weapons, out of everything except purpose. Jin turned his head toward her. "Do you ever think about what comes after?" She frowned. "After what?" "After all this. After we're gone. If the EMP works, what happens then? Do people rebuild? Or is it just more silence?" Mara didn't answer right away. She looked down at the Barrett, her reflection faint in its frozen metal. "I don't know," she said finally, "but silence is better than extinction." He nodded, accepting that as enough. Elias's voice returned, steady and emotionless. "Lieutenant Vance, I detect renewed enemy movement. Estimated contact in 6 minutes. Recommend immediate relocation to generator control point for manual activation." "Manual activation?" she asked sharply. "I thought it was automated. System integrity compromised by prior damage. Automated discharge will fail. A manual trigger is required to ensure successful pulse." Her stomach sank, meaning someone has to be there when it fires. Affirmative. She met Jin's gaze. He didn't need to ask. He already knew. "No," he said firmly. "You're not doing that." "I have to," she replied. "You're in no condition to move, and someone needs to guard the ridge until it's ready. If they breach before it fires, all of this, everything, is for nothing. You're talking about suicide. I'm talking about finishing what we started." Jin reached for her hand, his grip weak, but urgent. "Mara, don't let them take you down there. They'll surround it. You'll be trapped." She squeezed his hand once, then released it. "They won't take me. They'll never get that close." He stared at her, jaw tight, then gave a single sharp nod. "Then make it count." She rose, shouldering the rifle, though she knew it was little more than symbolic now. The weight of it grounded her. As she began her descent toward the generator caverns, the wind howled louder, carrying with it the metallic echo of the advancing horde. She didn't look back. The entrance to the cavern glowed faintly from the reactor's inner light. Frost coated the walls, shimmering like glass. The air inside was warmer, vibrating with energy that made her skin prickle. The generator sat in the center of the chamber, a towering column of metal and light, humming with unstable power. Sparks arced along its coils, casting fleeting shadows across the ice. "Elias," she said, stepping closer. "Talk to me." "Core stability at 64%, the AI replied. "Recommend immediate sequence initiation." "What happens when the pulse fires?" "All Cytherion units within planetary range will be disabled permanently. Secondary effects on biological systems, negligible. Operator survival probability, less than 2%. She allowed herself a dry laugh. "Better odds than you gave me earlier. Would you like me to record a final statement for historical archives?" "No," she said. "There's no one left to hear it." "Correction," Elias said. "There is me." Mara hesitated, then smiled faintly. "All right then, record this. Humanity isn't numbers or machines or power grids. It's the part of us that keeps standing up even when there's nothing left to stand for. Make sure you remember that." Statement archived. The ground trembled. Distant thunder rolled through the cavern as explosions erupted somewhere above. The Cytherians had reached the ridge. "Mara," Jin's voice crackled through the comms, faint and broken. "They're here. I can hold them for a bit, but you need to fire that thing now." "I'm almost there," she said. "Just do it," he rasped. "Don't wait." Static swallowed his voice. She clenched her jaw and turned toward the control panel. Her gloves shook as she entered the activation sequence. Warning lights flared red, alarms echoing through the chamber. The hum grew louder, vibrating through her bones. The comm unit buzzed again, Elias this time. Lieutenant Vance, Cytherion's approaching generator entrance. 30 seconds to contact. She gripped the manual override lever and looked up at the ceiling of ice, imagining the war raging just beyond it. She thought of Jean holding the ridge with what little strength remained. She thought of her brother, of every soldier who'd stood their ground when surrender would have been easier. The door to the cavern burst open with a metallic scream. The first Cytherion stepped through, its red eyes scanning, its body wreathed in frost and smoke. More followed. Mara raised the Barrett, though she knew the chamber was empty. The gesture was instinct, defiance. "Elias," she said quietly, "how long until full charge?" 10 seconds. The Cytherians advanced, weapons glowing. She stood between them and the generator, her breath visible in the pulsing light. 9. Her hand found the lever. 8. One of the machines raised its rifle. 7. Jin's voice came through the static, faint and trembling. "Finish it, Mara." 6. The rifle fired, searing plasma cutting through her shoulder. She barely felt it. 5. Her vision dimmed. 4. She forced her hand down on the lever. 3. Light consumed everything. The EMP pulse detonated, a shockwave of pure white radiance bursting outward from the generator. The Cytherians froze mid-step, their bodies shuddering before collapsing, lifeless, into the snow. The light spread beyond the cavern, racing across the frozen horizon, silencing every machine it touched. The world went still. When the brightness faded, Mara was on her knees beside the control panel, the Barrett resting against her leg. Her skin was pale, her breath shallow. She looked toward the tunnel where the storm's light spilled faintly through. "Elias," she whispered. "I am here," the AI replied, its tone softer now, almost human. "Did it work?" "Yes. The Cytherians are gone." She smiled faintly. "Then that's enough." Her hand slipped from the lever, falling limp at her side. The pulse of the generator dimmed, settling into silence. Snow drifted gently through the cracked ceiling, glowing faintly in the dying light. Above, the wind had quieted. The world was hushed again, but it was a different kind of silence, one born not from fear but from peace. Jin's broken voice came faintly through the comms, barely more than a whisper. She did it. She actually did it. The AI's sensors recorded the last human signals, then turned its attention toward the horizon, where the first rays of dawn crept over the ice. "Humanity endures," Elias said softly to no one. The light spread, slow and golden, washing over the snow where metal and flesh had fallen together. And far below the surface, beside the silent Barrett rifle, Mara Vance rested at last, her expression calm, as though she were listening to the wind.